They didn't accuse her of bad taste, they accused her of theft dressed up as glamour, and that's when the whispers turned into sirens. For years, the cameras flashed, the headlines swooned, and the world watched her glide into rooms wrapped in luxury that screamed power, privilege, and price tags most people would never touch. But behind the silk, behind the tweed, behind that carefully practiced smile, something else was happening. Something so brazen, so audacious, it has now detonated into what insiders are calling the most humiliating fashion scandal of the decade. Because this wasn't a styling mistake. This wasn't bad tailoring. This wasn't oops, it didn't fit. This was allegedly a system, a pattern, a hustle in haute couture. And now the House of Chanel is done playing polite. According to explosive reports out of Paris, a lawsuit worth $12 million has been quietly assembled like a guillotine behind velvet curtains. 47 couture pieces, worn, photographed. Chan, let that sink in. Not one dress, not a misunderstanding. 47. For half a decade, the public kept asking the same question: why does someone with unlimited access always look slightly off? The hems too long, the shoulders wrong, the fit unfinished. Fashion critics blamed taste, stylists blamed rebellion, fans defended it as her look. They were all wrong, because you don't alter what you plan to return. And suddenly, everything makes sense. Behind the scenes, sources say Chanel wasn't just refunding dresses. They were watching, testing, archiving. Every garment that came back didn't go on a rack, it went under a microscope. Literally. Fabric analysis, sweat residue, bronzer stains, level confirmation that these clothes weren't tried on. They were lived in. This is where the fairy tale fractures into forensic horror. Imagine this: a couture gown valued at over 6 figures returns to the boutique tagged unworn, but the neckline carries cosmetic residue. The underarms tell a different story. The lining remembers heat, stress, movement. Chanel doesn't guess, Chanel knows. And then there's the footage. Private fittings, time-stamped returns, paparazzi shots taken between purchase and refund, side-by-side timelines that show one truth on paper and another truth on camera. On the left, did not fit. On the right, champagne glasses clinking, laughter spilling, and the exact same dress shimmering under restaurant lights. That's not confusion, that's choreography. Insiders said this didn't start with royalty. It started years earlier, back when borrowing was survival and pulling clothes was industry normal. A trick of the trade. But somewhere along the way, the trick became a lifestyle. And the lifestyle followed her into palaces, onto red carpets, and straight into the vaults of the world's most guarded fashion house. Here's the part that turns whispers into gasps. She couldn't tailor the clothes because tailoring kills the return. So she walked into history wearing garments she had to give back the next morning. Every wrinkle hidden with tape. Every hem lifted with desperation. Every appearance timed like a hit and run. This wasn't dressing, it was leasing prestige. And inside the mansion, behind the gates, the illusion reportedly cracked daily. Picture a closet the size of a boutique, but everything wrapped in plastic. Not preservation. Protection. Boxes stacked for overnight shipping. Tags folded back into place. Wet wipes attacking collars. Panic in the air. One jacket. White tweed. A foundation smear that wouldn't budge. That's when the fight allegedly erupted. Just pay for it, a tired voice said. Pay retail? She snapped. They should be paying me. That line right there, that's the psychology. The belief that wearing something turns theft into marketing. That exposure replaces ownership. That rules bend for proximity to power. But Chanel doesn't bend. Chanel builds cases. Loss prevention teams allegedly compiled years of data, not just receipts, but movement logs. Couture doesn't wander unnoticed. Tiny embedded identifiers reportedly tracked where garments traveled, how long they stayed gone, and when they returned. One dress allegedly left a boutique, appeared at a hotel, attended a private dinner, stayed active for 4 hours, and came back the next morning demanding a refund. That's not shopping. That's utilization without payment, which is why this has allegedly crossed from policy violation into fraud. And the fallout didn't start with court papers. It started with a letter, not a refund, not a warning, a blacklist notice. Fashion's governing circles reportedly circulated a do not loan memo. One name, one warning. The quiet kind that doesn't trend but ends careers. Because in that world, if you can't borrow, you can't belong. Without the labels, the illusion collapses. Without the costumes, the role disappears. And suddenly the Duchess isn't dressed for the part, she's just standing in a house that costs more than the truth can cover. What makes this even darker is the alleged use of intermediaries, assistants, stylists, friends, names placed on loan forms, credit cards not her own. When damage surfaced, those names burned, careers quietly erased while the center of the storm walked away untouched. Until now, because the dots were connected, the cards matched, the IDs aligned, and suddenly the buffer evaporated. This isn't just a lawsuit, it's an eviction. And Chanel wasn't alone. Other houses are watching, comparing notes, checking returns, looking at stains they once ignored. A domino effect looms because once one luxury fortress opens its gates to lawyers, the rest sharpen their keys. And this is only the beginning, because when fashion turns its back, it doesn't whisper. It slams doors with silk gloves on steel hands. The moment Chanel stopped negotiating, everything behind the gates began to rot in real time. Because what nobody tells you about living on borrowed luxury is this: once the lenders shut the door, the silence is deafening. The calls don't come back. The fittings vanish. The invitations quietly dry up. And suddenly, the mirrors start telling the truth. Inside that mansion, panic didn't arrive with screaming, it crept in with spreadsheets. Boxes came back unopened. Couriers returned packages, stamped item refused. The trick that always worked before suddenly didn't, because now the boutiques weren't arguing about fit or policy. They were documenting damage, logging usage, photographing evidence. And then came the summit. Not public, not announced. A closed room gathering in Paris where luxury executives did what they do best when threatened. They compared notes. Same shadow stylists, same excuses, same stains, same returns timed suspiciously after high-profile appearances. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't one bad client. It was an operation. And once that conclusion landed, mercy evaporated. What followed was an attempted exit, a quiet one. A settlement offer slid across a table like a final lifeline. Pay a fraction. Walk away quietly. Never wear the brand again. No press. No courtroom. The response, according to sources, was laughter. The fatal kind. The kind that assumes status outranks contracts. The kind that mistakes exposure for leverage. The kind that convinces someone they are untouchable until they aren't. That's when the gloves came off. The damages allegedly doubled. Reputation clauses were added, not just for lost inventory, but for what the brand called vulgarization. A devastating accusation in fashion language. It doesn't mean scandal, it means contamination. Translation, you made us look cheap. That charge alone is nuclear, because if a court accepts that association itself causes harm, the implications ripple far beyond one house. It turns a person into a liability no brand can afford. And the personal fallout? Brutal. Former employees, long silent, were suddenly contacted. Assistants who once packed boxes at midnight. Stylists who scrubbed collars in hotel bathrooms. People who swallowed blame to protect someone else's image. They were done being shielded. They talked. They described instructions to hide damage, to deny wear, to cry if necessary, to manage the narrative. They described temporary fixes ripped out hours before returns, safety pins puncturing lace, industrial tape shredding linings. Couture treated like fast fashion because it was never meant to stay. Every story matched the physical evidence. And while the legal machinery roared to life, something else happened quietly. The fashion world moved on without her. Invitations arrived without names. Lookbooks skipped addresses. Stylists stopped replying. Agencies stalled. One by one, doors closed, not dramatically, but efficiently. The way industries eliminate risk. That's when the pivot came. Victimhood. Suddenly, the story wasn't about returns. It wasn't about evidence. It was about feelings, about being misunderstood, about unfair treatment, about bias. But the response from Paris was cold. A single leaked frame shut it down instantly. Video. Clear. Undeniable. A luxury silk scarf used as a cleaning rag during a private meeting. No confusion, no context needed, just behavior. The message was lethal in its simplicity. This isn't about who you are. It's about what you did. And with that, the blacklist hardened into policy. What followed inside the house was financial reality slamming into fantasy. Invoices surfaced. Alteration charges on loaned pieces, cleaning bills, shipping costs, items now unsellable, unreturnable, and fully chargeable. That's when the number stopped being abstract. Hundreds of thousands, then millions, plus legal fees, plus reputational damages, plus penalties for fraudulent returns. Suddenly, the lifestyle built on image revealed its real foundation, debt. And for the first time, he saw it. The ledgers. The patterns, the cost of pretending. The glamour had been subsidized by a system that finally snapped. And then came the quietest, cruelest consequence of all, replacement. Because while one closet emptied, another filled elsewhere. New faces, new muses, new women who paid, owned, altered, and respected the craft. Fashion doesn't mourn, it replaces. The final image is painfully small compared to the spectacle that came before. A woman standing in front of a mirror. No plastic covers, no labels whispering power, just a blazer bought outright. It fits, but it doesn't transform. Across the room, a magazine lies open. Another woman on the cover, tailored, certain, untouchable because her clothes belong to her. No one will loan comes the quiet confirmation. And that's when the truth lands like a verdict. It was never about the clothes. It was about respect. You can borrow silk, you can borrow status, you can even borrow a crown for a while, but eventually the bill arrives. And this time, there's no return policy. The case will likely never fully unfold in public. Settlements rarely do, but the damage is permanent. In fashion, reputation outlives money, and once you're labeled unsafe, the industry doesn't forgive, it erases. What remains is a cautionary tale dressed in ambition and undone by entitlement. The woman who wanted the image of wealth without the responsibility, the role without the rules, the dress without the receipt. The lights have gone out, the carpet has been rolled up, and the performance is over. Because in the end, couture remembers everything. Every stain, every lie, every thread pulled too far.